Hi, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to our next exciting session featuring Ceeso. We're very glad you're all here. Thank you to our moderator and panelists for being here. And it's my pleasure to introduce the sponsor of this afternoon session, Andra Sheffer, CEO of the Independent Production Fund.
The Independent Production Fund is really pleased to sponsor this particular panel. I know that there's a lot of curiosity about what these relatively new kids on the block are doing, and amazing work with a lot of scripted content, and I think there's going to be a lot of information that's going to be of a high interest to many of you here. It's certainly something the Independent Production Fund is interested in. We have spent the last 6 years funding about over 100 now scripted web drama digital series with $50 million. So we're pretty excited to, well, not 50 million, we have over 10 million just in the, we also do television too. So we're really keen to see what kind of partnerships, what kind of things are available here, how Canadian producers and others internationally can work with Ceeso, and just find out what you guys are really all about and what you're up to. So I'd like to introduce you now to your moderator, Michael Schneider, who is the Los Angeles Bureau Chief for the Television TV Guide magazine, right? Okay, thank you, Michael.
Well, it used to be, but
you should give your real job now.
Exactly. I'm now executive editor at IndieWire and also editor at large at Variety. So thank you so much for joining us for this little panel. We're discussing Dan Harmon and Ceeso as well. So Evan Shapiro at the end. So your official title is NBCUniversal's Executive Vice President of Digital Enterprises.
Yep.
And then Dan Harmon's Dan Harmon. He's the man. He's the creator, executive producer of Harmon Quest on Ceeso, as well as, of course, you know him from Community, Rick and Morty, and all the other goodness through the years. So Dan Harmon, thank you thank you both of you for joining us. Yeah, why not? Shout out. So first off, I love that we now live in an age where Dan Harmon playing a role-playing game with his buddies is a television show. So Dan, kick it off by telling us how Harmon Quest came to be.
I think that a couple of things in the beginning stages happened at the same time. One was seeing the Ricky Gervais HBO show that was based on recordings from his podcast that he did with Carl Pilkington.
Yeah.
And really realizing that I was endlessly entertained by impromptu audio coupled with animation, with the animation sort of bringing what was being said to life, especially when what was being said was absurd and off the cuff and wasn't scripted.
Yeah.
And so I was noticing that, and I think in TV or in all things creative, it's your job to like follow your own laughter. And I noticed when I was watching that show that I would laugh so hard, my sides would hurt, which was a rare thing. And then the other thing was that we started playing Dungeons and Dragons on my podcast, which was an audio thing. And it was off the cuff, and because it was Dungeons and Dragons, and there was an audience there for that podcast, and they're listening to us play Dungeons and Dragons very badly. And so I thought the two things together might work really well if we could give the audio of some of these sessions to animators. Also, kids online that were fans of the podcast were doing it anyway. That was a natural instinct for them. Oh, I should draw this actually happening.
Yeah.
And animate it in Photoshop and After Effects and whatnot, Flash and stuff. And so it was that was confirmation for me that this might work.
At the same time, at Harmontown, your show, you guys have done a lot of role playing as well, and you bring on celebrities to do it. So it kind of just all came together. This has become kind of a nice part of your brand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's the third chapter of it was meeting this knucklehead because we had pitched the idea to Amy Carlson at Universal Cable Productions before Ceeso existed, and then I think we had pitched it to a couple places. We were developing it. We were interested in doing it. Amy was very on board, and we had done like a test run. Originally, the idea was to do something just for the internet that would be very cheap and would be animation all the way through. And then when Ceeso started, she got me on a Skype call with this guy, and whose reputation preceded him from the work he had done at IFC. And he said, why don't we do this the slightly more expensive way? Because I think people like to look at famous people, and let's do like a hybrid. And you had done production work on Dinner for Five, right?
Yeah, I was an AP on Dinner for Five, and we talked about kind of marrying Dinner for Five, Game of Thrones, and Rick and Morty into one big mashup. And
It's quite a mashup.
yeah, and also I think what's interesting, what Gervais kind of did was take improv into animation, which has been done here and there, but not in long form all that much. And that was what really we've been working with UCB and a whole bunch of other improv and sketch folks, and this was a way to kind of take that to the next level.
I do love that it does seem like you guys are just having a blast doing this at the same time. Starting with Spencer's head just appearing every once in a while in the animation. But also, it looks like it's a lot of fun. How much structure is there in putting together an episode?
I mean, that part I have to be left out of because part of it is I'm playing the game, so I can't know, but Spencer puts a great deal of work into, as the dungeon master, he has to prepare story areas. It's an interesting tightrope you have to walk as an old school analog dungeon master. You want to prepare for certain encounters. You want to have maps and things of areas that you are 90% certain the characters are going to have to explore, and you want to, at the same time as being prepared for that stuff, if you're a good dungeon master, you have to be prepared for the players to just jump out a window. You have to be able to sort of improvise on the spot based on your understanding of the universe and the rules. You want to try to strike a balance between letting on that the characters are being pushed into a certain narrative and letting everything go haywire.
But the cool thing is that Spencer wrote out the story arc for the entire season, and it was this massive document. So it's what he's working on. So dungeon master / showrunner. It's kind of a mashup of the two jobs, and there is where I originally thought we were going to have a self-contained episode where there was a game played in every episode, and in reality, what came to be is this 10-episode story arc that has twists and turns, and it's driven a great deal by the improv that happens in the moment, but there is a quest to it that it feels very, very satisfying by the time you get to the end.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that Spencer gets a written by credit there, just because
well,
he has.
Because it's not lightly. I mean, there's a lot of writing that he did to put into. I mean, you know better than I do, but
yeah, I made sure he's got an EP credit. He's got, and I made sure he didn't get paid a penny less than I did on the venture, because all I'm doing is showing up and playing. I mean, he's the only one that's doing any hard work except for the camera crew, because he has to write all of those things. Then he has to sit there on camera and improvise, and then I also, as time went on, I slowly loosened my grip on the editing of the shows and let him step into the role, which he did great.
This might be a good time to maybe, because it's
say.
I know you probably have no idea what this looks and sounds like, so Dan brought a clip.
Yeah, there's a clip we have. One of the reasons why I wanted to do Dungeons and Dragons as an animated hybrid project is because one of the funniest things about D&D to me growing up was that your parents thought that you were doing some satanic thing that was going to bring the devil into your life. The truth of it was so much more awkward and funny, because when you play these games, you oftentimes will take 20 minutes to get a door open because you have these arguments with each other, which reminds me a lot of Abbott and Costello meeting Frankenstein. That there's these moments that end up becoming ridiculous exercises in frustration. And so this clip is from the Chelsea Peretti episode. She plays a dwarf that's escorting us through these mines, and we're trying to get in some mine carts. It couldn't be simpler.
All right, let's take a look.
You pass through unhindered. You see several long metal levers that seem to control the tracks.
I look around the levers to see if there's any labels.
Nope.
Labels. Idiot.
The tracks split off into 3 sections, each going down a separate tunnel. There's several minecarts that seem to be locked up.
I jump into a minecart.
You do that.
I jump into hers.
Okay.
I take, how many other?
3, apparently.
Okay, I take, which one did you guys take?
Yeah, the one that was closest.
I get in the middle one.
Okay.
Can we reach the levers from inside the cart?
No.
I get out of the cart, I go over to the left lever, and I pull it.
You pull it. You hear a metal clunk.
God damn it. Now get in the cart. Maybe your weight will carry the cart forward. Noted. I gotta say, at the Festival of Restoration, you were hitting the snack stands pretty hard, man. The thing is, it's plaids. I was saying any weight. This is not a personal attack on you.
Are we in the game?
In a way.
I mean, she's half elf. You're a gremlin.
Goblin.
Wow.
Gremlin. It's racist. Kind of what? If it had to do with weight, it would have. She would have. Like, it's not. Okay.
She would have what?
Uh-oh.
You're. Okay, you guys get in the car. I'll try pushing it. You guys get in there, and I'll try giving you a push.
Anything to get him out, right?
Yeah. So I'm getting back into the left cart with her. Bone Weevil is getting out of his cart and pushing our cart. I'm pushing their cart to see if it moves.
I jump. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
Well, I was gonna, but you're pushing their cart. You didn't get into your own cart.
No, I'm pushing with their cart to see if we can get this thing rolling.
I'm sorry, with the bar, you pushed the bar and nothing happened?
We heard a clunk.
Right, okay.
A clunk happened.
Anybody hear where that clunk came from? Half elf. You got pointy ears. Are they pointy because they are sharper? Is there a brake system on the carts?
The carts have levers internally, yes.
Okay, then try your internal levers in the cart. I try the internal lever.
Oh, man. You do that, and immediately the cart starts rolling.
Bone Weevil!
No, not fast, though. Just, you know.
Bone Weevil! I'm lugging up alongside him. I jump into the cart.
As do I.
You all pile into the cart as it rolls off.
Animation really makes a difference with role-playing games, I gotta say. You can't go back after that. How does that work with the animation? You send back the completed episode and then you have animators design it? Like, how does that work?
We edit it down. The sessions are an hour long. We edit them down to a half hour, roughly, and with an anticipation that about 75% of that can be animation for the budgets. And then we deliver a half hour chopped up version of the live performance to animators, and then they take it from there. That's where it intersects kind of perfectly with the way animation usually works anyway, because at Rick and Morty we write scripts, and the first thing you do is you have actors come in and read do the takes, and you edit a radio play together and hand that off to animators. So that's what we do.
Very cool. Well, let's kind of get back to Ceeso, the origin story of Ceeso. Yes, Evan, I know. Talk about the very beginning of the idea, where it came from, and
So in 1967, I was born. No.
Okay, don't go that far back.
I had a meeting with senior management at NBC, Steve Burke, and they were very clear that they wanted to get into direct-to-consumer SVOD, not just by selling the content to the other SVOD players, but to really create their own direct relationship with consumers, mostly because that's where consumers were headed. They were finding their own content online and subscribing and watching it, and sometimes not subscribing and watching it. And NBC really didn't have any direct-to-consumer brands or entities. Primarily, it's a wholesale company, cable networks and broadcasters through the distributors going to the consumer. And so rather than to try to replace the existing linear brands. We wanted to create a kind of diversified portfolio where we have the #1 cable network in the United States, the #1 broadcast network in the United States. We wanted to create brands and channels that complemented that. Didn't replace it, didn't compete with the linear brands, weren't just porting over existing linear brands and replicating them online, but to fill out the portfolio. And so we did about 11,000 interviews. I agreed to come there, and it was very clear that NBCU was very committed to making this work. And I came there, we started an entrepreneurship, a startup within the company. We're not in 30 Rock, we're in Soho downtown. We did 11,000 interviews, asked the consumer what it is that they wanted. And rather than try to solve a business problem like we need to be in SVOD because that's where everything's going, we asked the consumers what their consumer problem was, what their viewing problem was. And so, I'll just as an experiment, raise your hand if you have if you're in the United States or Canada, if you have Netflix. Okay, 100%. Now raise your hand if this is true. You're at home on a Saturday night. Perhaps you're not in the middle of a binge where you have someone over and you've got a bottle of wine, or if you're in Canada, maybe something else.
Sausage, bottle of sausage.
Well, I was thinking about things that are illegal in the United
Evan,
States.
that's racist.
Sorry. Racist, really? And you don't want to binge something. You want to just find something to watch. You're in the mood to just find something, and you log on and you search, and you can't find something, and you maybe switch services and you search some more, and maybe into a glass of wine now, and you can't find something, and it's 20 minutes later, and you can't find something to watch, so you just watch something. Does that happen to you? Raise your hand. So that's the consumer problem we were looking to solve. And SVOD right now, in the United States at least, is really much like television was around 1980. 3 big aggregators serving all things and all people at all times, but it's like going into Costco and trying to find something in particular to watch. So we decided to go really the cable way and create a big niche brand. And the #1 brand by a long shot, the #1 genre by a long shot amongst consumers who we interviewed was comedy. So we decided to create comedy. They liked the idea that we'd have the entire SNL library, that we'd have The Tonight Show and Late Night next day. They liked that we'd have Parks and Rec in The Office. But what they said they would subscribe for was exclusive original content. And so we really went hard at exclusive. So we have Monty Python exclusively, the entire canon. We have Kids in the Hall exclusively, the entire canon. But then we decided to really invest heavily in original programming because that was going to drive subscriptions. So we decided, we greenlit and are producing and in the middle of rolling out 23 original series in our first 12 months, 20 original stand-up comedy specials, all in the first year. And it's really working. Original, even though it's a lot of content, is still only about 4 or 5% of our content, but it's driving north of 70% of our subscriptions. So 4% of our content is driving 70% of our subscriptions. And the concept here, at a very low price, $3.99, was to not compete with Netflix or Amazon or Hulu, but to be a complement to them. You didn't know what you were going to wanted to watch, but you knew you wanted to laugh. And that was the very long answer to how we came up with the whole concept.
Well, there's a bunch of different ways to kind of jump off that. So, but my first question would be, with all that original content you're doing this year, what kind of budget do you have? Is there sort of a big year one budget, sort of just to kind of get in the door?
It was. So we actually we designed this like a web entity. Not a legacy television brand. So it was really about getting to scale as quickly as possible. So we, pretty much throughout the year, we're launching a brand new series or special every other week. And the cadence is really driving subscription. The budget's pretty decent. I mean, it's not as high as a small cable network in the United States. But what we really came up with was a 24-month, 30-month budget. And we spread it across those 30 months. Dan's show has the honor of being the most expensive show we did our first year. It's animation. It's got a lot of production value to it. So on the high end, we're doing shows for mid 6 figures. On the low end, we're doing shows, stand-up series for $50,000, $60,000 an episode, and everything in between, really. And then for next year, we're really amping up and producing more at a higher level, but still maintaining stand-up shows and things like that.
Well, Dan's makeup and wardrobe budget,
Alone,
I think,
yes.
was pretty substantial.
He's really actually has no beard.
Yeah. I'm like Al Pacino. I have a rider in my contract about my hair.
Right.
I don't know
There's
if you've
12
seen-
people on the hair.
Oh.
So Dan, how many episodes did you guys do of Harmon Quest?
10.
So is that the sort of the standard order for?
No, it's really all over the place. The great thing about digital is there are no hard and fast rules. The real only filter we have is that it's comedy, obviously, but that it's premium, long form, not web videos. We're not doing 5 and 10 minute episodes. We're doing quarter hours, half hours, hours. And we've done 6 episode series. We've done 16 episode series. We've done standalone specials. Next week, we launch our first direct-to-platform film from Morgan Spurlock, which is a documentary about an all-female rec league basketball team in LA. It is, thank you. Aubrey Plaza's in it. It's called Pistol Shrimps. And we're launching it with an animated show that's 15 minutes per episode called Gentlemen Lobsters, because we wanted to have it be completely unkosher that day. It's a crustacean joke. But what's cool is we the team who's sitting over there, really created something that we were calling mapping the comedy genome. We started with the content that we had in the library, and then we really wanted to go after performers and artists. It's really an artist-driven platform. Almost all the shows start with a writer-artist, and then it branches out from there. So we were lucky enough very early on to get UCB, the Upright Citizens Brigade, Amy Poehler, Matt Walsh, Matt Besser, Ian Roberts, Dan, and a really great show from Kulat Vilasak and Scott Aukerman and Tom Lennon and Ben Garant called Bajillion-Dollar Properties. And that became the community around which we built the service. And what wound up happening is they all kind of know each other in this LA comedy scene, which is really blowing up right now. And they cross-pollinate. A bunch of people from our other shows are in Dan's show. They're all casting each other in each other's shows, and it very much feels like a community, the way that the comedy nerds themselves, the viewers, feel about live comedy and comedy right now as well.
Yeah, there's almost this repertory company feel to comedy these days, especially in LA. But no one's precious anymore about platforms. I mean, Dan, you could do a show for basically any platform, right? Or is there a difference in doing shows for different platforms?
No, I mean, the less you're getting paid, the more you're able to do what you want. I think that, and we're finding out that artists were never bluffing about wanting to do whatever they wanted more than they wanted money. I mean, if you could get paid the same as a dishwasher gets paid for making content, a lot of people would do it. They would choose that as their job, even if it meant you had to work twice as hard as the dishwasher for the same salary. And what we're calling the golden age of television in the States, really what that means is that the money's leaving the top. It's not the place, if you're not passionate about television at all, to make a bunch of money. So I think that first wave of quality in the form of the Breaking Bads and things was the result of an already crumbling kind of like fragmentized TV industry losing some of these real villains that were just hanging out to make money. They were like, yeah, I'm gonna go work somewhere else. And I think that money going away lowered budgets. It created a new breed of basic cable television exec, a development exec who was willing to say to somebody like Vince Gilligan, just do whatever you want. It's an honor to have you in my office. Can you really make a show for this little money? Yes, I can. So I went off on a tangent there, but no, we're not platform precious at all. I think when people hear about a Ceeso, it's something that just, it's like just as long as they're going to be in business a couple of years from now. My first conversation with Evan was a very frank one. He pitched me the Ceeso platform, and I said, well, these things, the outcome is random. It can't be controlled. We don't know if we're talking to the Steve Jobs of television before the iPod or not. We don't know if we're just talking to another person that's going to run like a Sony Crackle or something like that. And some of these things linger, and some of them don't. And because we have no control over that outcome, why would I want to do this show there? And the answer was because we can do a version that we couldn't do anywhere else.
Well, had you already gone through the Yahoo experience, or was that still going on when you guys were talking about Ceeso?
It had launched Community and had been up and had run its course, pretty much at that point.
Because do you think was there a learning opportunity there with Yahoo and your experience with them, or was that such a different experience?
The only thing I learned from Yahoo was therapy, like actual just psychological therapy, in that it was like all of the villains were removed from the process. I had nobody to blame but myself anymore, and found myself having even more difficulty writing the show, sleeping on my couch for weeks at a time instead of days at a time. Sleeping on the office couch, and suddenly realizing, oh, I take some of this dark cloud with me. This isn't Sony's fault all the time, you know. Like but other than that, the Yahoo experience was simply, it's the same as the Ceeso experience. It seems like more honest labor now. Silicon Valley is, for you know, we sometimes make fun of the idea of the algorithmic approach and just they don't treat television as if it's some kind of sacred thing, like they're honored to be in that business. They treat it like a business, and that is a good thing for creatives. Like, creatives have always wanted it to be that way. We're petty, competitive, we're egomaniacal. We want an even playing field. We want to be able to measure whether or not we're the best. You know?
Yeah, and I think the other key factor, and I think one of the big reasons we've been able to attract the level of talent we have is, you know, creatives and artists, they just want to make stuff. They don't want to be in development hell for months upon months upon months. They don't want to take endless meetings. They just want to come up with the idea and then get to making it. And I think the most surprising, if I can speak for you for a second, the most surprising thing that came out of the meeting between me and Dan was we bought it in the room and we were ready to go. You know, it wasn't him pitching me to make the show. It was me pitching him to make the show. And we did that. We greenlit 22 series, last year. And we've added a couple since. And I've only been at NBC for 18 months. And we've made or are making 23 original series.
And
that
Evan,
means a lot.
I'm curious, does in figuring out what the Ceeso brand is and kind of coming up with the mission statement and the direction that you want Ceeso to go, does that inform what you pick up, or vice versa, is what you pick up sort of eventually branding what you want Ceeso to be?
Well, we started with 42 seasons of SNL. We started with a lot of great stuff and added other things to it. So we mapped out this comedy genome, which is actually handwritten by Dan Kerstetter, who's sitting over there, on our wall, into this thing that does have a connected tissue to it. So it all makes sense together. We have a programming filter, which is bold, authentic, and funny. We call it right brain comedy, and we know, we don't do prank humor. We're not doing a lot of kind of reality format stuff. So it is meant to hang together in a very distinctive programming brand, because that's necessary. When you're a brand new brand, the brand is driven by the artists and the content you put on it, but then if it doesn't hang together really well, there's not really a reason to come back.
And I imagine, bringing on talent like Dan Harmon, that just, that sort of immediately tells the world and the buying community, oh, you guys are serious about this. You're in business. And I imagine, what were those meetings like when you started to meet with the town, with the agents, with, hey, I've got another new platform in a town that's sort of overwhelmed right now with new outlets?
Yeah, I mean, it was hard. I had to pitch Dan. I had to pitch Cameron Esposito. Real hard. I had to go to South by Southwest and explain to the UCB4 what exactly this was, and we didn't have a name yet. So that was difficult. But then when the artists started to come on board, and then I think really what was big key to this was we became, I think, known as pretty artist friendly, and all the comedy community talked to each other and said, hey, this is not a bad, who knows whether it'll exist in a year or two, but it's a fun place to work. They make shit. It's not bullshit. The notes are what they are. They're productive notes. They're not kind of typical TV executive, make this funnier. So I think that reputation built. And then when we announced, and we had 20 series on our slate, or 21 series on our slate when we announced, I think that was surprising to people. I think a lot of people expected us to just repeat CBS Access, and when we didn't do that, and they saw what we were making, the agents want to sell, the artists want to sell, so they were just happy to have another real buyer in the room.
Well, what's interesting too for both you guys, there's been a lot of talk about the sitcom, the broadcast network sitcom in crisis. You know, NBC has literally 2 comedies on their air right now. Their oldest running sitcom is The Carmichael Show, which has only been on for 19 episodes. So you look at broadcast TV, CBS has struggled to, you know, sort of capitalize on Big Bang Theory. ABC kind of figured it out with family comedy. Fox is still kind of figuring it out, but yet at the same time, it kind of feels like we're in a golden age of comedy. It's just comedy is no longer the sitcom.
Well, it's like we've gone from mass to niche. And so the great thing about the current state of television is no matter how big your audience is, there's an audience. So if you look at HarmonQuest, and you know, Harmontown is a subscription podcast, which does pretty well, $5 per month, right?
Yeah, it's $5 a month to get just stuff earlier.
Oh, that's more expensive than Ceeso.
Right.
Yes, it is.
So subscribe to Ceeso, don't subscribe to Harmontown. Portlandia, which is a show that I worked on at IFC. I mean, does anybody here ever seen Portlandia? So you're the entire audience right here. So. But it's considered a zeitgeisty hit. Mad Men was not the largest hit in the world, but it was a cultural phenomenon. So niche is, even big shows like Walking Dead, it's still a niche show compared to the #1 show in 1972 had 67 million people watching it per week. The #1 show right now on broadcast television, I think, has 19 million people watching it per week. So we've redefined what a hit show looks like. So in comedy, Master of None and Love and Catastrophe and Transparent can be considered hits a lot of times because Nielsen ratings are not the currency there. It's subscriptions. You demonstrate your passion by paying for it on a monthly basis. And honestly, we don't need to have 5 or 6 million people watching a show for it to be enormously successful. We know when a show is driving subscriptions. And so, you know, the definition of a hit has resized itself. And in comedy, bless you, we're in a much more artisanal world than we were, you know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago. There's the mass hit of the Big Bang Theories, but the shows that are driving the zeitgeist are these small, hand-stitched shows like Baskets that are really turning people's minds around about what comedy can mean. That's another long answer, sorry.
Well, I'd be curious, Dan, your thoughts on that too. I mean, Community came at an interesting time in that it was still a big broadcast show, so it kind of fits into that artisanal mold that Evan was talking about, but at the same time, it was a broadcast network show.
Yeah, it's not a good area to be ahead of your time in. I honestly, the Sony execs they would refer to what I was doing as pandering to the blogosphere, and it was the 5-year lifespan of Community at Sony was unfortunately for Community. Actually, if you look at it in terms of television evolution, it's like Community was this lungfish, like that just died, so that the lung, I don't know, like that 5 years during which Community like sort of sacrificed itself on the altar of caring more about what people were tweeting than this kind of broken Nielsen needle. I mean, the Nielsen needle was thicker than our audience. You know, it's like it could only measure American Idol at that point. It was born of a time when you were splitting 200 million viewers 3 ways or whatever the population of the United States was. So, anyways, the Community, like by the end of its run, as you could see from the Yahoo deal that Sony was all too willing to make with Yahoo, they had figured out by then. In 2009, I was getting yelled at for tweeting about the show. In 2015, showrunners were being handed a Twitter account that had been registered for them with a bunch of rules about what to hashtag and when to tweet and how to live tweet. That showrunner as band leader kind of thing, the fact that showrunner became part of the household vocabulary during that 5 years. Yeah. It was all the Community's unfortunate or fortunate, depending on how you look at it, kind of little life there flapping on that shore was a microcosm of what was going on in TV. As far as like why we're living in a golden age of comedy, even though there's no gigantic comedy hits, I think another cultural reason is that, for better or for worse, like comedy is big business, America is a very successful empire, despite what you've heard, and we're kind of like we're unloading comedy by the bushel, and yet right now culturally we're also waking up to all of the million ways you can offend people, and so it's better. It's a better route to a harder laugh. If you break the audience into smaller chunks, than expecting something that would make 60 million people laugh is probably not going to be that funny anymore. If it's going to actually avoid, hurting the hell out of huge sections of the population, which was fair enough as a transaction in the 70s. But now it's like, okay, let's take 2 million people that are gonna laugh at this, and 3 million that are gonna laugh at that. I think that, and those comedies can be sharper. They can have edge. They can go dark. And if you're offended by it, it's fair enough for the creator to say, you shouldn't be watching this. There's 8 shows for you over there.
There's really no excuse to be watching bad television at this point, because whatever particular interest you have, there's a show for that. And so, but at the same time, comedy is this, at least in America, comedy has surpassed any religion as the most popular thing. And the #1 religion for people under the age of 40 in America is none of the above. And yet, 12,000 people took classes at UCB last year. Earwolf, which is the #1 comedy podcasting platform in the United States, has increased their downloads by 700% over the last 24 months. So there is all this comedy, and people are seeing comedy in living rooms, in basements, and they're going 3 or 4 times a week, but they're seeing their very own particular brand of comedy. And social media has really helped that. Comedians can talk directly to their audience. Dan has an enormously passionate group of people who religiously follow you from platform to platform. This guy is on more platforms than anybody. So Periscope and Twitter and Instagram and not Facebook.
Friendster.
MySpace. So you can get your comedy in the dose that you want. You don't have to cater to the least common denominator anymore.
Well, Evan, I'm also curious, your previous job, you helped launch Pivot, and your focus there was very much on this millennial audience. Talk about that audience, what you learned from launching Pivot, and is that a similar audience that is sort of the consumer for a OTT service like Ceeso?
I mean, obviously, millennials are the largest bunch of cord cutters out there. They're inventing this new digital landscape every day. But then when you look at the generation that's coming in behind Generation Y, which is Generation Z, they don't know from any other form. I mean, at least my kids who are millennials, remember the videotape. They remember having to change channels. If you have a child under the age of 11, they have no concept of a screen that doesn't move when you touch it. So it's completely changing the way people consume. But that said, I think we're in a post-demographic era. So when advertising was king, demographics, 18 to 34, 25 to 54, women 17 to 22, that really mattered. Now, when you talk about niche-oriented content, we literally do not give a shit how old you are when you watch our stuff. As long as you have an active credit card, or an Amazon account or an Apple Pay, we want you. And so we are for comedy nerds. That's a psychographic. I think the psychographic of Walking Dead are people who love zombies. So we have to shake. The Nielsen thing is we're still tied to this old school way. I mean, there are people still writing in diaries for Nielsen. And we're still thinking in an old world mentality where the 30-second commercial was the king of everything. Subscription is now a much faster driver of video viewing, and we have to pivot away from thinking about demographics and into passion points and thinking about psychographics.
I was going to say, now, I mean, since you're not ad-supported, you don't have to think about demo in the same way. So at the same time, and I know you're kind of hyper-focused on this comedy enthusiast, but as you look to broaden out, as you look to continue to expand your subscription base, do you at some point have to be all things to all people when it comes to comedy? Do you need some mainstream comedy hits on top of?
Obviously. So we've had some really decently sized hits for us. Bajillion Dollar Properties, which launched in March, is doing incredibly well for us. Hidden America, which we launched last week, which is a half-hour scripted comedy, which is a spoof of Anthony Bourdain, is really killing it for us right now. Flowers is this great little precious comedy that we co-produced with Channel 4. You know, we think we can, comedy nerds are a very large group. Are there 40 million of them? I don't know. But a good subscription channel can survive on 4 or 5 million subscribers, and so I think you can do a really good business. I think we have to move into other genres in order to broaden, but not necessarily broadening beyond necessarily trying to cater to the lowest common denominator.
Yeah. What also interests me about Ceeso is that obviously it's an NBC Uni property, but you don't wrap yourself around NBC. You don't
Not
see
at
the
all.
peacock. You don't.
Nope.
You know, talk about
No,
that.
it was months after I signed my contract that I found out I was working for NBC. Oh shit! I guess that's.
Don't pick up that page. Just send it. Also, all your paychecks actually revert back to me. I don't know if you knew that either. We don't, because no brand tested as well as any brand. And so, you know, when Snapchat can reinvent video viewing overnight, you know, and a 24-year-old CEO can launch a brand that now has, I don't know, 1 billion views a day. The barrier to entry to creating a new programming brand, a new video brand, is very low. It's just a matter of creating, you have to find that network effect. So has anybody here ever used Venmo? Does anybody know what Venmo is? No. No, it's not. Sorry, racist again. But Uber, when it launched, they gave away free rides to you if you recommended a friend. And that really proliferated the platform very quickly, at least in the Bay Area and in LA. And so we're looking for that network effect of, you know, spread the word for us. And so much more than an NBC brand or a bigger brand, the brand of Dan Harmon, the brand of Jonah Ray, the brand of Kulap Vilasak, you know, the brand of Wyatt Cenac, they are our brand carriers, and their user base kind of all talk to each other and compare notes.
Dan, how do you divide your time these days? I mean, like Evan mentioned, you've got a lot going on. You've got shows on multiple platforms. You've got your podcast. You've got your Harmontown show. What does Dan Harmon's daily life look like?
Yeah, I get up, I mean, depending on what type of day it is, I'll get up as early as 6 a.m. Once a week I have therapy and a chiropractor, so that affects the day. But on a typical day...
Are they the same person? The therapist?
God, no, that would be
awesome.
By the way, that's genius.
How does this make you feel?
Yeah, well, that's Jacob's Ladder, right? That's the Danny Aiello character from Jacob's Ladder. Gabriel, I think his name was. He was an angel. It's very, very, very deep hidden metaphor.
Spoiler alert.
The Ceeso's doing a Jacob's Ladder television show pretty soon with
Big reboot
with Gallagher as the Tim Robbins.
It's actually Gallagher 2, not it's the second Gallagher.
The
inside joke.
I get up, like, I figured out that as lazy as I am, if I have an appointment, I won't break the appointment. What I will do is I'll blow off anything. If it says on my calendar, you're supposed to write your book for Doubleday for 2 hours, I'll just, if there's no one watching me, I'm not going to write for 2 hours. But I hired a person to come sit in my office at 9 a.m. on weekdays, and she sits there for 2 hours, and she like, for half of the advance from Doubleday, which I gave her, she like, records me babbling about stuff while I'm drinking, and then she blah blah blah. She like collates and does stuff in silence for 2 hours. Sometimes I don't say a word to her, but the entire time she's there, I'm writing that book. And then so I've figured out now that everything I do, I have to do it by appointment. Like I'll always make someone have a meeting with me whenever I am. So I'll get up at like 7 and do a couple of things, alternating depending on what the day is, and then at 11 I work on Rick and Morty till 5, and then if there's more stuff, then that has to be done at night. Like I've got a lot of crap to do right now, and I don't know how I'm doing it.
So you just need someone that you don't want to let down standing next to you. So because you're fine with letting yourself down.
Absolutely, yeah.
No,
Yeah, if you give me 30 days to write a script, I'll just masturbate for 29. Like, and if the script doesn't, oh, thank you, Canada, thank you. That doesn't play as well in LA. I guess just my employers are usually in the audience. Was that what that sound was on the notes call? Sorry, I thought you were using special paper. Too far?
yeah, maybe.
Perhaps.
But I mean, I think there's an auteur class that's happening in the creative community right now, and Dan I think embodies that, which is they're incredibly complex human.
Touristic.
Yeah, arturistic. Well, they're incredibly complex people who are enormously prolific despite whatever garbage they put in their own way. And it's a remarkable thing to watch. We work with, Dan is probably the biggest name in this way, but we work with a lot of artists who are, Jonah Ray has 17,000 things going. I don't know how he does it, and yet they're delivering their cuts on time. They're always at the press call when you need them. It's remarkable to watch. And I will say, Starburns Industries and Dan's entire team around him is a joy and a pleasure to work with, because they all take it so seriously. The work is what really matters, and what's on screen is how they judge themselves. And it's a real pleasure to watch happen.
Is there a difficulty, though, in not having exclusivity on talent, and that they are being pulled in many different directions? They're not always available for you, or is that the reality?
I think brands really have to become comfortable with letting go. We don't make first position the last requirement on a contract. Just deliver the show that you're doing for us on time, on budget. And Dan's done one of those. And no, on budget. And we've been really generous in not requiring that. And I think the artists appreciate that on the back end. What's really important is that the show is exclusive. The show can only be found on our platform. And that's really what's driving the interest from the consumer. Dan's consumers, audience, followers will follow him wherever he goes. And as long as they know he's not phoning in whatever he's doing, which rarely happens.
Or until I hit a kid while driving.
Right, well, don't do that.
I think about it all the time, like, what could I do to shake these people?
Which is why he has a driver.
Yeah, I don't have a car, yeah.
Spencer is the EP and
I figure that's
showrunner
the only
and
thing that
drives
could
him.
happen to me, yeah, is it like a DUI or something? Like,
And so the content being exclusive, you don't want to pin down someone like Dan or Jonah or Cameron Esposito or Wyatt Snack. You want them to be able to work wherever they want to work, and you hope that they want to come back.
Yeah, if they're doing what they love for you, then if they happen to be in Die Hard 5 as like a hacker or something,
only good for us.
It can only, it'll drive it back.
Yeah, the success of Rick and Morty is very good for Ceeso, even though it's not on our platform.
One more question, then we'll turn it around over to you guys for a couple. In terms of SVOD and the future of these platforms, do you kind of feel like you got in right under the wire? Is there going to be a point where people say, okay, I've subscribed to Netflix, I got Amazon, I got Hulu, I got Seeso, maybe I got CBS All Access, I'm tapped. I'm not going to buy anything else.
Well, if you look at what's happening in the industry, so 50% of our subscribers do not pay, they're not cable subscribers. So they're not paying that big bill on a monthly basis, so they have more room for subscribing to other things. I think there is a capacity to subscribe to a number of different things. I mean, think of the number of things you subscribe to on an ongoing basis beyond simply television, publications.
You know what he's talking about.
Birchbox, Blue Apron, and
Pornhub Premium.
But I do think there'll be an aggregator of it. We launched as an add-on subscription on Amazon, and that was a big shot in the arm to our platform. And so you look at what they're doing with Showtime add-on subscription, Starz add-on subscription, Acorn add-on subscription, and they're becoming a one-stop shop for subscriptions. I think what you'll see is just like television in the 1980s where it got really fragmented really fast. You're going to see that happen, and then it came back together because the choice is awesome, but it's also a huge pain in the ass. And so I will subscribe to many things. I would like it all on one bill. So I think
Right.
that's what you'll see is a reaggregation.
Isn't that, yeah, I was going to say, isn't that called cable TV?
Yeah.
It's called rebundling. It just delivered a different way. Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially if I'm sure what'll evolve is these packages and with discounts within them,
Yeah.
right? I mean, like if someone comes to you and says, we're going to include Ceeso in this giant bundle that we sell very successfully, and you'll go, okay, then we can knock $1 off for.
Yeah, the one thing different in SVOD bundling, I think, will be a much deeper a la carte nature to it. So you can, yes, it'll be bundled in, but you'll also be able to desubscribe to things and pick your 5 favorites
Right.
and get it for one price.
Yeah.
And you're already seeing that. Sling, Comcast is working on a skinny bundle, Hulu's working on a skinny bundle. I think you're going to start to see those things. The biggest problem television faces is not interest. There's more television being watched than at any point in the history of the medium. It's packaging. It's giving the consumer the freedom to pick and choose the networks and the brands that they want to watch. Yes, people watch shows, but they'd rather have an aggregator help them choose, a curator help them choose. So I think you'll see that the freedom mixed with the convenience.
Yeah, and that's where, some of the smaller cable networks, as we know, are going to run into problems.
Yeah, I think you'll see great movement. I think the lines between pay TV, traditional, and SVOD will begin to blur dramatically in the next 18 months, as in the United States, a lot of cable contracts come up.
Well, let's open it up for you guys now. You got some questions for these two yahoos? No pun intended. We got a couple over here.
Oh, yeah, I don't need that. Essentially, I'm just curious.
You do not.
I'm curious about, I'm assuming that you funded your initial, massive chunk of production with old money, like broadcast money. And yeah.
The Rothschilds.
What?
It's an old Jewish money joke.
Well, okay, so assuming that system goes away entirely and this becomes our future,
I don't think it will.
you don't think it will?
No, I think it will. I don't think broadcast and cable and pay TV will go away entirely. I think it will be a dramatically different shape. Maybe it'll be 60% or 50% of what it is today. But, I personally plan on living a long time, and I'm never desubscribing from cable. So, and I think there are a lot of people like that. I think there are other people who will desubscribe. So I think it'll be a mixture between the two.
And the upfront marketplace is still billions and billions of dollars.
It's the biggest upfront in the history of TV.
So even if it doesn't go away, with 5 or 6 million viewers, can you be self-sufficient as an SVOD aggregate?
First of all, I'm not making any predictions on the number of subscribers we have, so let's be certain there. But yeah, if your economics are correct, and they subscribe and you can keep churn down, that's a number that's a viably profitable number. Is it spitting off the same amount of money of some of the larger linear brands? No. But if you can do 5 or 6 of those in individual genres, so for example, cable, each individual cable network is somewhat profitable. Together, they are much more profitable. So the idea is to create an environment where you're serving several different big niches, comedy, others, and that you cobble together more than 3, 4, 5 million subscribers, but you do it across different genres.
And then you can continue to develop as much content as you did in the last 18 months.
Well, you should remember that we did all this content. It's a very low cost per hour set of content. So we're going to do more in money next year as far as how much we're spending, but we'll do fewer shows. So what we're planning on doing is doing less better. But we wanted to come out of the blocks with this much content.
Got another question here?
Hello.
Same table.
I will use the mic. I was just wondering, I know with Netflix, the difference between sort of the US Netflix and Canada Netflix, we have a lot of stuff that is not available. And are you guys going to be regionless, or how do you see that rolling out?
Our international ambitions, we'd like to be in as many territories as we possibly can. We're going to take a different approach. The Amazon lesson of being able to have them offer our subscription through their platform and the frictionless nature of it was very, very telling for us. So we are much more in the partner business. So we're here, we're talking to various folks about hopefully finding partners for this territory and others. And that way, the partner can bring whatever licenses they have to the table to supplement, as opposed to us having to go territory by territory and then scoop up rights. One of the big things, as far as we're finding, is if you're very greedy about the rights on the way in when you're dealing with a producer, it scares them off. And why a lot of producers are coming to us is because they're being offered basically a little bit better than, here's an extra 10% on top of your budget, and you're an indentured servant for the rest of your life. And that's not a relationship that a lot of producers want. So we are offering an alternative, a much more flexible alternative to that.
Thank you.
All right, more questions? Got one right over there. Oh, over there.
In a healthy world for you, like when things are running and everything's great, how many shows are you greenlighting a year, in theory? How much original content are you
I'm going to
creating?
defer to my programming team that's sitting over there. No, it's that old Potter Stewart quote. I don't know it, but I know it when I see it, which is porn. So it's really about. We know how much we have to spend. And we're beginning to understand how many shows we're going to bring back for a second season. Dan's show has yet to launch, so undecided. But the concept is we know the size of the budgets we'd like to spend, so it's not as many as we did, not nearly as many as we did this year, but still we'd like to be on that every other week cadence with a special or with a show, because the consumer has shown us that if you don't say something that often, they will leave you, because there is zero barrier to desubscribing. It's not like cable TV. So the conversation has to be constant, or it ends.
And what about acquisitions, library content?
We will continue to do that, and we're looking at stuff right now. Our focus, whereas we did a lot of stuff non-exclusively at the beginning, that's probably over. We are looking almost exclusively at exclusives, because if it can be found on a much larger platform, it doesn't really have that much of a value as far as a driver for us. So we'll do some acquisitions, which is why we'll look at quirky stuff. We did a really great co-production / acquisition with Gail Pyle here in Canada. We acquired the first season, took it off of YouTube. It's now up on our service, and we're producing seasons 2 and 3, and they'll be exclusively on our service. That's a cool thing. And we did that with a production in Australia called Soulmates. So we're looking at more interesting partnerships. We'd much rather partner with an organization than simply just buy a piece of content.
I had your colleague, Kelsey Balance, on my panel this morning.
I heard she was very good.
And I told her I was very excited to see the entire Saved by the Bell library on Ceeso.
Yes, we have that.
So,
we do have that. We don't have it exclusively. We do have that.
But it's a place that I can power it through, so that's great.
Yeah, but you look at a show like Garth Marenghi or Nathan Barley, which is not really available in the United States. These are small shows that very few people have seen, but they really need to be seen. And the whole Monty Python library, there are people that need to see that if you consider yourself a comedy geek.
The comedy geeks. All right, I think we got time for one more question. Is anyone going to ask Dan about the Community movie? Are you going to make me ask him that?
Are you going to make a movie?
What's the latest, Dan?
There is no latest. I'm not going to sit and write a script and then find out the heartbreaking news about who would be available to do it. And at the same time, the actors can't, they can't all line up in a group and say, well, okay, we're ready to do whatever you write. So there's difficulty there. I know Gillian's out there, she's really been calling me out on every platform.
Yeah.
I think Joel's always been down, but I wouldn't want to do it without getting Donald Glover back, so I'm waiting for him to run out of rhymes. I guess I don't know.
We'll give it a few more years.
I'm trying to ruin rap for him by doing it a lot of my podcast. Trying to show him the futility of that media.
Yes, hip hop, that'll never last.
It's a phase.
What date does HarmonQuest debut on Ceeso?
Bastille Day.
Oh, that's right, Bastille Day.
July 14th.
You guys know Bastille Day. It's the Frenchest holiday in the States.
All right. Well, we'll be looking forward to Harmon Quest. Thank you very much.
Oh, wait, by the way,
Dan.
I wanted to, you made a joke about us being behind schedule, and the reason was because of this. There was
I
this
was not.
animation house that kind of like, they started to kind of drop the ball, and we had to get back on schedule by taking their work and handing it to Bardell, which is a Canadian animation house. Which does Rick and Morty almost exclusively. I think they do like all of Rick and Morty.
And it looks, well, you saw it, but it's terrific.
Yeah.
Viva Canada. All right. Thank you, Dan and Evan.